Hey folks, we are back. This is Military Gun Guy. This is part 2 of the Danish Krag broken wrist repair video. As you can see, we have the little contraption that I had made off. There's pieces of wax paper that are still stuck. That's not a big deal. We'll actually be, a lot of that flakes off. Once we clean this up, we'll actually be fixing that. The next phase in this is to reinforce the repair. Oops, shitty glove. The next phase is to reinforce the repair. You can see where, you can see where I have actually marked with a pencil some of the areas that I'm going to fix as far as reinforce. While the epoxy is extremely strong, because of the shock of firing this rifle, even though I'm probably not going to run full power loads through it, I still want some integrity in this wrist. What I had done was basically cut a piece of dowel rod, okay? And you may or may not be able to see it, but I actually grooved it down the side. I use this bit, it's like a cutting bit on a Dremel, and just basically very slowly went down the side like that. I planted into the vise, which helped considerably. The reason for the grooves is that when you tap this in, it's going to actually need a little bit of a channel to bleed some of the epoxy out. What I had done is I drilled, you may not be able to see it, but I drilled right down into there, okay? And as you can see by the marking, I drilled at an angle. So this is going to be tapped into the stock right about there, okay? You can also use a screw if you want. You'll need a longer bit, and you can just basically lay your bit right alongside your piece, and you can say, okay, well, this should be good enough. You might have to kind of wiggle it a little bit to open the hole. For the most part, you get the idea. So the first step is to epoxy and then tap this down into the hole as far as it'll go, okay? By doing this, it actually is going to sort of lock these two pieces, the top and bottom, in together, because again, we had sort of a diagonal break as opposed to a straight break. I also got a couple of brass screws. This shorter screw is going to go to the bottom, the top screw is going to go from the top. And what I had done is I had pre-drilled the holes into my stock so that I can actually insert and countersink these in. Actually, I'm going to be going, the shorter one's going to go this way, okay? And I kind of I roughly mark the angle, so it's actually going to be going into the stock from the top, and it's going to lock in this way. The bottom one is going to be completely separate. It's going to go in from the bottom, and it's going to go lock this way. So once this is together, and this is countersunk underneath the surface of the wood, this is actually to make for an extremely strong repair. From there, I'm going to dress all this up. So once the epoxy and everything dries, I'm going to dress all of this up. And then I'm going to show you how to remove a little piece here and actually splice in a new piece. There's a little bit of a seam there. Again, you can't, it's very hard, especially on a rifle this old, that where the wood has had a chance to separate over the years, to get a perfect tight fit. But once we dress this up, okay, we're going to mix up some wood putty using the donor stock, and we're going to make it, it's going to basically we're going to make like a paste out of wood glue and shavings from the donor stock, and then we're going to actually pack it in here. And once this dries, this seam will be almost invisible. Epoxy will actually make your wood shavings darker, so you're going to want to use a piece of wood that's lighter. This is a tad bit too light. You're going to want, like I said, we have a donor stock with a couple of pieces that are lighter and darker. I could even take some walnut shavings and mix that up. So what we're going for is a fairly invisible yet almost impossible to break repair. These will be plugged from the top and the bottom with actual wood plugs, walnut wood plugs that I've ordered. Those should be in by Monday, and by the time this is ready for that final step, you'll see, you know, what the last part of it is. So I'm going to go ahead and mix up some epoxy. I'm going to put it on my wood dowel. I'm going to tap it in there as far as it'll go, and then we're going to wait for a bit. I'm going to re-drill the holes that are just to make sure that I'm actually locking into this piece. So basically you start with this piece, okay, and then you're locking the screws, or they're going to go through the dowel, and that's going to sort of actually tie everything in together. So let me mix up some epoxy and I'll show you what we're going to do here real quick. And I've mixed up my epoxy, as you can tell. Now we are going to take this, and we're just going to apply a semi kind of generous amount on the dowel. Don't worry if it blocks some of the holes that are in your stock here, because we're going to basically be cleaning that up anyway. So again, I kind of had determined the angle initially, so basically going to tap that in, and we're going to just tap this in until it bottoms out. This is not exactly the most secure to hold your stock. Ideally you want to do it down there, but this will give you the idea. And just using a rubber mallet or a double-sided mallet with punch. And you can hear where it's bottoming out. Okay, so now this dowel is nice and deep inside the wood, and a couple more taps. Let me get a slightly smaller punch. Try this one more time. I'll put it here for extra stability. I can use two hands. As I'm tapping it in, I'm actually using smaller sizes of punches. Now, I had already pre-measured this, so where are we at? I had already pre-measured this, so as you can see where it's pounded into the hole, that it is already at the angle that I want. So it's gone in, it's gone into the wrist at about this angle and marked it by a pencil. So that way we have a little bit, once this dries and hardens, we have some good structural stability and something to actually lock the two pieces, the top and bottom together. And then from there, I'm actually going to re-drill this part. I'm going to insert the long wood screw from top to bottom, and then the small wood screw is going to go into this hole here, and again it's going to lock from the bottom to the top, lock these two pieces, and then from the top to the bottom, lock those two pieces. So that, you don't have to really use anything fancy on this at this point. You can just take your drill bit, if you don't have bits that are long enough, you can just take your drill bit. You can put it right at the edge of your drill, and just nice and slowly drill into your stock. This is also a good source of some wood shavings as well. Now, also when drilling at an angle into a rifle stock, you're going to find that if you go this way, the bit's going to walk. So I find if I go straight into it to start the hole, okay, and once the hole started, then you can go at your angle. Okay, and that basically gets you past the dowel that you just inserted. Okay, now the next step is to, you want a larger bit about the size of the head of your screw. Okay, and what you're going to do is, I've already done this for myself, is I'm going to drill a larger hole, and this allows for the countersink. This is going to actually go below the surface. So I'm going to, and another thing you can also do if you like, it's totally not necessary, is you can actually put some epoxy on the threads of the screw. What that does is it actually sort of lightly acts as a lubricant and allows the screw to go in a little bit easier, and again also locks it in. Let me get a screwdriver. Basically just going to stick that in there, and with a screwdriver, and just crank it in by hand. Okay, so just to give you an idea, you can see the screw head in there, okay? It's countersunk below the wood line. So when we plug this and dress this whole area up, it's going to be almost invisible. Obviously this is still sticking out, and I'm just going to finish cranking this in. You don't necessarily need to use any sort of impact wrench or anything. You can just do it by hand. A lot of times also the wood will be slightly soft. Okay. And you want to keep going until it's nice and tight. Something to keep in mind, epoxy does shrink. And so no matter how much you put in there, it's eventually going to shrink into the crack as it dries. And I'm just going to stick what's left on here. You can even take some wood shavings if you want. Stick those in the hole for now. Again, you're not looking for perfection. You're not going to get it right away. Once this is dried and hardened, after about, you can probably get away with like 5 or 6 hours. then what we're going to do is we're going to start dressing this crack. You'll actually see the seam here once all this extra wax paper has been removed, here and here, and we can start addressing, fixing these seams and making them invisible. Once the wood plugs come in also, I just ran out, we're going to tap a couple of wood plugs in. It's going to be about the color of the wood, so it's going to match nicely. Everything is going to be sanded and dressed up to where you will basically, if I didn't tell you, the goal is if I didn't tell you that this thing had been split in half, you wouldn't be able to detect it. And again, you're looking for structural rigidity, short of taking this and slamming it onto the ground and breaking it again, which actually would probably more likely fail in this area because this is thinner wood. This rifle stock will actually last a very, very long time, and you would be able to shoot this without fear of the stock coming apart. So we now have, just to reiterate, we now have a wood dowel that's been placed inside the channel, okay? And a lot of times if you have a stock that is cracking but hasn't quite broken in half like this one, you can actually get away with doing a lot of the repairs internally or even very lightly from the outside. But what I've done is I had drilled at an angle here and I inserted a wood screw, and that basically locked these two pieces together, the top and the bottom. And then this is after I did the dowel. And then I put another piece down here and here, or actually another screw, and that screw has gone from this piece down to here. And what's that's done is that's sort of locked it diagonally in addition. So we have three different forces at work that are pulling this rifle, the wrist together to give it strength and rigidity to where it won't flex and it won't break again. So when we come back, we're going to dress all this up once this dries, and then we'll show you how to hide these seams and how to plug these holes and just blend everything seamlessly. Then finally we'll do a stain. Actually we're going to fix this right here. We're going to fix this one next. Just a matter of just dressing that up a little bit with a file and then attaching the duffel cut. But this is obviously our main focus because this is so much damage has been done to this. But once we're done, this will be mostly invisible and nice and clean. Might give it one more wash to clean everything up so it's nice and light. And then I'm also going to show you how to recut these grasping grooves a little bit, just to basically, there we go, freshen these up a bit so that way you have, these are actually, if you look at the original Danish rifles, these were more prominent. These are actually not even sanded probably. This might have just been worn down with age of just being held and whatnot. So we're going to freshen these up a bit as well. I wanted to show you a quick video on cleaning up all of these kind of rough areas on the stock. I'm actually using a rasp. With the rasp you have to be careful because on wood it cuts through quickly. The problem though is that it'll leave some deep gouges on your stock. So you just kind of want to knock down some of the high spots with this and then switch to a file and then finally sandpaper to actually get this knocked down. But this makes quick work of all the extra wax paper and epoxy that is stuck to the stock, and then you can clean everything up with the file after, which I'll show you. Now the reason I'm doing this over the trash can, some people might be saying, hey, why aren't you catching some of those nice shavings? The problem is I'm not getting a lot of wood shavings. I'm actually just trying to knock down these high spots. So I don't really want the nice wood shavings mixed in with this kind of crappy wax paper and epoxy resin. I'd rather actually get pure wood shavings for my repair. You might also find while you are scraping your stock that it'll start to turn kind of a black color. What that is that's just old oil and stuff. The heat from the rasp, even if it's not getting that hot, is actually going to bring a lot of that stuff up to the surface. So this will actually require probably another couple of washes before I really give it a good final treatment. I'm using a file, it's a crosscut file, and what this does is this lightly smooths out the rasp marks. But you can see where the repair is very slowly, in a few spots, starting to actually disappear a little bit. If I start getting too much clogging, I'll actually just go through, I'll scrape this thing clean and then go from there. The other thing also is, again, I'm just looking to knock this down lightly. This still needs a considerable amount of work before, in my opinion, it's ready to stain the top coat. But you can see little by little where we're getting some invisibility in the repair in a couple of spots. Once this is stained and top coated and we hide this seam a little bit better, it'll actually, this repair will be mostly almost invisible. These will be plugged. This will be plugged. You can't really see it right now. I put some wood shavings in there. But I'm liking where this is going. A couple more scrubs, especially the wrist, because obviously the soldier holds onto this. A couple more scrubs will actually get a lot of this darkness out, and will leave the wood very, very clean and whatnot. This is one of the reasons why I like to strip a stock completely before I do any work on actually matching it. A lot of people will try to leave the original finish or any type of finish, and that's unfortunately can be very, very difficult to match because, especially with a stock like this, with the amount of work that needs to be done on it. So as you can see, it's starting to shape up nicely. There we go, it's a little better. It's starting to shape up nicely. We still have obviously a very large crack to fill. A couple ways we can do that is we can use some wood putty. This can be backfilled with some epoxy. Use some, not wood putty, I'm sorry, but shavings from the sanding. We can actually put I can put a lighter piece of wood into my belt sander and collect all the shavings, and you use that to fill this. And once this is lightened enough, you'll actually find that the seam will mostly be gone. This is the ugliest part, but this can actually be filled fairly easily. Again, we have structural integrity on this. There's no flexing whatsoever, which is what you want. These are the original nail holes that you can see. Those will also be minimized and filled and whatnot. So yeah, this is coming along nicely. Again, this is up next. We'll be taking a belt sander to a piece of donor wood. You know, we want some light wood about like that color, because once it's mixed with epoxy, it gets dark. We don't want this darkness. Ideally, we want something along this line when it's dry. That way the seam will be easier to hide. It also will depend on your top coat and the stain you're going to use. I use leather dyes. These stocks were originally, obviously they weren't dyed or stained in any way. They were just top coated with either a tung oil or a linseed oil or whatever was used back in the day. I'm gonna artificially replicate that with leather dye and whatnot. So the trick is to get a dark enough stain to hide the seams, but not so dark that the stock looks artificial. I'll probably go with like a tan color or an orangish color that'll really bring these tiger stripes out really nice, so that you can kind of see as I sort of flex the stock where it almost gets like a hologram, which is really kind of cool. So like I said, when we come back, we're going to start working on these cracks, filling up these holes and whatnot. I need to wait until my wood plugs come in, which will probably be Monday, but we'll get this all squared away and get this stock all back together. Stay tuned.